Thanks, Brian. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Farmington School Board meeting. Would you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on our agenda is public participation. Before we start, I just want to state we're going to try to handle this a little bit more efficiently this week. Had a few concerns raised by residents that weren't able to speak at the last meeting. So at this public participation, which I'm going to allow for 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to open it up to residents first. And if we have time, staff can join in with their comments, but we want to make sure that people are brief, 2 or 3 minutes, and give us their concerns or issues. Starting with members present, I think we have somebody from the community, so Bruce, go ahead.
I just wanted to come here tonight and donate this to the drone class that Brian's doing, I guess. Is it?
Yep.
And I got all kinds of extra supplies with it. I got three batteries, a multi-charger, all kinds of stuff, and it's a real drone. It's not a little one. So hopefully the kids can use it and it'll do good in the class.
Oh, we certainly will appreciate that. I'm sure that the people participating in that will make good use of it.
And that's good.
Bruce, can you hold up the box so that the TV can get a shot of the front of it? Is there a picture on the front?
This is the camera right here. So, yep.
So it's a Phantom 3
Yeah,
drone.
Phantom 3 standard.
Nice.
And it will officially be on the agenda next week, so there's a formal
Right.
acceptance. It has to be on the
Right.
agenda, but this is.
So yeah, we do appreciate that. In the next meeting, we'll just have it on the agenda to formally accept it.
Okay.
And
Bruce, is there a value to that?
There's somewhere between $2,200 and $2,500 with everything.
Nice. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure the kids will have a blast with it.
All right, no problem.
thank you.
I hope they enjoy it.
That was Brian in the background.
Background saying thank you, Mr. Shagnon.
Don't forget to pick that up before you leave, or somebody might take it home like me. Try it out.
Lock it in the studio.
At this point, I'll open up to other residents. Do we have anybody online?
If anyone would like to speak, you can identify yourself. So far, no one has put anything in the chat.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it open till 7:45, but I do want to touch on a couple other things while we're just regular business. So if somebody comes on, please interrupt me.
7:45 or 6:45?
6:45, sorry, 6:45.
Okay?
As we know, tonight we're mostly concentrating on budget. Today is the last day for us to finalize to go before the Budget Committee. I guess, Ruth Ellen, if maybe you want to start with a couple items that, late-breaking things. I know there's a revenue, just touch on some small things in case we have some comment.
Okay. What you have in your folder for the board, typically and by board procedure, we have done an update of revenues at the first meeting in December. As we are pretty close to falling into December, I went ahead and have updated what we have so far. I don't anticipate that I'm going to have much different information for you for the 7th, so what you have there was updated this afternoon. It's going to give you a picture of this year. We now have some more revenues in. Fewer of those are projected. We have some more of the actual. So the difference from what you saw in October, I now have 4A, 5B, let's see, 2A are actuals as opposed to anticipated or projected for this year.
So while you're talking about those, I have a question. So
Sure.
you're saying if that's the actual it's going to be, and then you said...
That's this year for SY21. For next year, everything is a complete projection. I have nothing for
And where does the, like, on 5, or 4 and 5B, where does the 83 and 82% number come from?
Those have been the trends that we'd had over the last few years. That was the average of the decrease each year. So
So, yeah.
we had a decrease and then an increase this year. I'm projecting they're not going to increase it 2 years in a row. So I put the decrease back to what it was in '20 for Title 4A. It may actually go fairly flat, but I would much rather under a little bit than have it too high. We were at 43, 36. This year they gave us 47. But had been looking at the decrease the second year. And that one, the Title 4B had been under Title 6 previously, which you now see zeroed out. As of last year, it went to 4B as opposed to Title 6. We're looking at roughly 80% down for the last couple of years, what we had seen from the others. We may have a little higher than that.
When you say 80%? No.
Well, we've gone from 25 to 20, from 20 to 17. We maintained 17 and 16 the last 2 years. I did a worst case projection on that of the 82% that we had seen with the biggest drop, because the state revenues are,
That's on a Title 5B?
yes, the state revenues are not looking like they're going to be particularly robust for next year. And while this is federal funding, it is dispersed through several different channels, and we may or may not see a very big chunk of that for next year. IDEA, again, that's based on kind of the average of the past 2 years. Same with preschool. Robotics, I don't know that we're going to receive anything. The allocation that we got for last year didn't come out until mid to late December of last year. And then with COVID, there were no competitions. I don't know that we're going to get an allocation this year. Student assistance program, in the last couple of meetings, I believe it was the last meeting, I included in your folder the email that we got that is saying that there is no revenue anticipated for that. It was a 3-year grant that we were awarded a 4th year this current year on. And right now, they do not have that funding stream. They're looking to see if there's anything they can give us, but it doesn't look like we should count on any of those monies for next year.
So if we look at that top section, which is grants under these items, if we were level funded, which you're not projecting, which is conservative, then it would be 8, there's another 5, 18, so if we were level funded, besides the last 2 lines, it might be another 35, maybe? That's if they were level funded.
If they were level funded, yeah, perhaps another 35,000. It's not going to be a large amount.
Right. And
The biggest one that we're losing is robotics.
We weren't funded in '21?
We don't know yet. We don't
Okay.
have an allocation. Last year's didn't come out until late December.
Okay.
And so if they send us anything, it will be probably just before Christmas. But I don't know that they will, because at this point, no one knows that competitions could even run. So, and then the large one was the student assistance grant.
Which there's no sign of at this point.
The only thing that I have is the email that says, don't expect funding.
Okay.
So I put not anticipated. If we get it, that will be happily serendipitous and we'll take it, but I don't know that it's going to happen.
So your projection below level funding is, say, could be 45,000 at tops
Right.
with the robotics. But with
Right.
that, so it's conservatively under, down what you've got. So even if it was the additional 45, that section would be still quite a bit shy of what it was last year.
Right.
It would
Or-
still
well,
be-
this year, yeah.
This year it would still be,
It's 287, 246
it'd
short.
almost be 250,000 still shy
287, 246.
right now. Yeah, so if you added 45 back in there, it'd bring like 230, 240. So hopefully it's level funded, but I think these numbers are good for budgetary purposes. So if you want to keep going on the.
Okay,
I just have a question on robotics.
sure.
Within Fund 10, is there anything budgeted towards that program? I mean, if we lose the funding, what happens with the program?
The only,
Hello?
Yeah, I was just wondering when people were going to be able to speak about the remote learning subject.
Okay, can you state your name and the street that you live on?
My name's Joshua Wiederhold. I live in Farmington on Crowley Street.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, as far as public comment, let us know your concerns or thoughts.
So, a few of my concerns, you were talking about taking away the learning at home or whatnot. So, the other day, I spoke with a member of the Farmington PD, and he had the COVID. He was quarantined for 2 weeks, and his son actually had COVID, and he had absolutely no symptoms at all of it. So you really can't tell who has it and who doesn't. And there's a lot of people that, both parents at the home are at high risk for getting COVID, and it could possibly be detrimental to them. So I strongly disagree with taking that away.
Okay,
It should definitely be the parent's choice whether, in this instance, the children go back to school versus staying home and learning for everybody's safety. There's quite a few new COVID cases daily. There's a lot of old folks' homes that people are actually dying in the old folks' homes from this sickness, and I really don't want to get it myself, and I know there's a lot of people that are in the same boat. It could potentially, render the children parentless at that point. So I have very strong feelings against that. I just wanted to be able to voice my opinion along with a lot of other people in the town. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you for your thoughts. I mean, we are keeping everyone's thoughts in consideration as we continue on with this year of education. Anyone else with public comment at this point? Jen?
There's nothing in the chat at this time.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to close the public portion as far as the public comment. It's 6:45, and we'll go back to the budgetary things that we have to get done tonight. So I want to thank everybody who did participate, and, excuse me?
Excuse me, so, my name is Joshua. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
So
please.
my name is Josh, and unfortunately, I already lost a parent once, and honestly, I don't feel like losing another one due to this. And I do have Raynaud's, and it does connect anxiety, and this does affect me a lot. And I'm a 9th grader in high school, and I'm very concerned.
Okay, and you currently remote as far as your education? like I said to the other gentleman, we are trying to take everyone's needs into consideration as we move through this year, and I think once we get past this budget cycle tonight, that it'll certainly probably be on our discussion at the next meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Yeah, you as well.
So go ahead, Ruth Ellen.
Okay, Tim had asked about robotics. Right now, there are some monies in the stipend line for coaches. It's not as much as has been in the past, but there are monies in, because part of that is paid out of the grant. But there are some stipends in there for coaching. As far as supplies and those other things, there is not in the regular budget.
So this current budget year?
This current budget year, there are stipends included for robotics, but there is not a regular budget for supplies and
So
other
are we
pieces for
able to
robotics.
adequately fund what we have for curriculum in this area this year?
Robotics is an extracurricular, it's a
Okay.
club, and right now, it's not running,
Okay.
partly because we don't know that the competition is going to happen this year. Should it go, we'll have to see, just where we are. I certainly don't want to see the program dwindle.
Can we put a note potentially for a warrant article to raise and appropriate the 13,316 out of fund balance for the robotics program? Do maybe a,
Rest of the, I'm okay with it. Rest of the board's thoughts, Joel, Josh, and Stan? About Tim's suggesting we might have a warrant article to raise and appropriate to approximately $13,000 to fund that line for the year 2022.
Are you talking about 2022 or for 2021?
Well, 2021, we're going to be pretty much through.
we'd have to find it within this year's budget to do it this year, but
Right.
the budget we're working on now, I'm not seeing any money for robotics. From what I understand, it's been a really popular program with the kids, and I think it should continue.
I mean, we may get funding from them,
Right.
and then that money that's raised, we could potentially set aside in a capital reserve account or some,
I'd be looking to put it into a capital reserve account that, again, if it's not needed the following year, we could discontinue it, we could repurpose it, but I'd like to have the money on hand so that the program doesn't die.
I would agree. Any thoughts from the other members?
This is Stan. I would just prefer that you put it right into the budget, right? There's no reason for a warrant article, just put it in our budget.
Okay. I think, Joel, you had something else, too?
Well, yeah, Stan makes a good point. Is that we just want more input from the community about the program and the support for it?
Charlie?
Tim?
My intent, having sat on the budget committee, is with grant funding. I think the vision that's the better path to take when a grant runs out or we don't get the funding is to ask permission of the taxpayers. We can put it in the budget, but I think as we move forward, that number might be a harder number than we're anticipating once we start to calculate raised by taxation. For the robotics, I don't see the taxpayers saying no. And I just think it's smarter to ask permission than to put it in the budget because it's a grant that's either run out or we're not getting.
Up to this point, it was grant funded.
Yeah, yeah.
Josh?
I would agree with Tim on this. I think as a rule of thumb, it would be better off asking the taxpayer a large amounts of money than just deciding for them.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think if they do agree with it in later years, we would potentially consider it a budget item.
Right.
On an annual budget.
Yep.
But up to this point, we've been having the benefit of a grant, so that the taxpayers haven't been paying the bill, and now with this transition, asking them if this is something they want to fund, I would agree with that. I'm very hopeful they'll support, and I think they will. But it's also going to be a tight year for a budget cycle, where I think the taxpayers are going to see some increases based upon a drop of revenue. And they may make some tough choices at the ballot box. So at the point of discussion, I don't know, maybe we should have a motion. Because we're going to need to have clear direction for Ruth Ellen, so I'll entertain a motion for that.
We'll make a motion that we raise and appropriate $13,320 from
I'll place a warrant article on,
raise and appropriate by warrant article, the $13,320 out of fund balance for the purpose of funding the robotics program.
Out of fund balance or raise and appropriate, so you're talking about from unexpended fund balance?
Unexpended fund balance, yeah.
Okay.
is there a second?
If it's from unexpended fund balance, I can't carry it forward in an encumbrance. I have to use it in the year it's raised and appropriated. So if you raise and appropriate it.
Raise and
as-
appropriate a warrant article out of fund balance in a capital reserve account for the robotics program.
So you want to start a capital reserve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we'll put it into a future year. If it was
Okay, and
used.
so the capital reserve is started from unexpended.
Right?
Okay.
And then I'll have another one after.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Josh. Discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Guess motion passes.
I'll make a second motion to file a warrant article to make the school board agents to expend.
You want a
Would
second, or do
would
you
that
want
be an
that in?
amendment to that warrant article? Or would that be in that warrant article?
It could be done either way. We've done it both ways. If you have a warrant article that you have not made the board agents to expend and it passes, but then you are not made agents to expend, then you can't touch it without going back to the voters the next March to expend it.
So it's your motion, Tim, but whether it's going to be amend the previous one to add that to it, or a separate warrant article. If it's a separate warrant article, if it doesn't pass, then we can't expend it without permission the later year.
The downside to it is if the taxpayers don't think that we should be agents, then they may not fund the actual program, and that's why I prefer to do it
But we
both.
won't be able to fund the program and we'd have to wait till the following March to find out whether they allow us to tap those funds.
No,
which
but
is-
if there was, I think he's suggesting that on this warrant, there'd be the warrant article to create it, and then a warrant article for us to be agents to expend.
But if it gets created, but we're not agents to expend, we're another full year in March to find out whether or not we can tap it, which means that the program isn't running because we can't get to the money.
That doesn't make any sense. You're
Right.
saying if there's a warrant article 10 that says to raise and appropriate, put in a capital reserve, and warrant article 11 asks the taxpayers to make us agent to expend,
If
we
the-
can't expend in,
If the warrant article passes that says we can create the article,
Yeah.
create the fund, but we are not agents to expend, we can't touch
right,
it.
if it fails.
If it fails.
Right, if it
And
fails.
that, so we may create it, but then not be able to
Right, I
use it
agree
for
with
the
that.
program.
But that's Tim's motion.
It is.
And I'll leave it up to the board. I just see it that, again, it's asking permission of the taxpayers. It's $13,000. We're agents to expend on every account with the exception of the bigger account that's about $500,000. I don't see the taxpayers saying, no, it's permission, and I'd hate to see it fail for the money-wise because people don't want us agents. Let's see what the board thinks.
That was a motion, right?
Yeah.
Was there a second?
Josh, I think.
Did Josh second?
I believe it was
Yes,
Josh who
A
seconded,
second.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's your motion. If that's the way you want to go, I'm okay with it. I'd prefer it to be in the original warrant article, but that would have to be, your motion would have to be amended, but either way,
I mean, what's
We-
the...
we need to have it
what's-
created
What's the
and-
consensus of the board? If the board wants it in the warrant article, I don't have a problem in the
Well,
article.
Joel and
do you
Stan?
need to have a motion to amend the
Right.
article?
Right, but in the discussion of this one, your thoughts, Joel?
I just amend the original motion.
Okay,
This is Stan, I would too.
all right, I'll withdraw my motion.
So I'll make a motion to amend the motion regarding setting up a capital reserve account for the robotics, to amend it to say, to make us also agents to expend.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Well, you're accepting his amendment, correct?
No.
No,
he
I withdrew
it.
mine.
You
So
withdrew
he
the-
seconded my
Okay,
motion.
all right.
Discussion? Not hearing any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Okay.
So moving down through into the adequacy aid, you're projecting,
That's a projection that was given to us by the state on November 15th with their projections that are sent out every year on that date. It is in line with what we received for '20. Remember that this current year's adequacy includes a one-time $825,000 plus payment that we were told would be a one-time payment. And so this is actually a little bit more than we received in '20 because our membership, our average daily membership, our enrollment has decreased some, but we're actually getting slightly more per student.
so, and that one-time payment was based upon a revenue surplus at the state, or what was the reason for that and the funding source?
Funding source was state funding. Large portion of that was a free and reduced portion based on our numbers, and then also another section that was considered to be an educational adequacy based on town revenues. So because we are not considered to be a wealthy town, we got more on that. Some towns did not get as much out of that one-time payment. It was considered a kind of a leveling with everything that's gone on with COVID this year.
So was there any discussion that there may be something similar this year, or it's been dead silent?
What I've heard
I've heard
from,
nothing, and with the
No.
way the revenues are down, I wouldn't be counting on it.
what I've heard from our state rep does not sound likely that this is going to appear in the next budget.
Okay.
So the total loss of revenue between the fiscal year we're in now and next year is $1,326,923, is that correct?
Unfortunately, it is. And what we saw in '20, there was a one-time payment that's not included here that was returned to the town as it was not, because it came in separate from the adequacy, that was returned to the town as part of a tax reduction. It did not go to any of the expenditures for the town, for the school
Yeah.
rather. So that was about $990,000. So we received two large one-time payments that happened one year right after the other, but those are not on the radar here. If you take those out, we've remained pretty constant. It's just when you get a one-time hit like that, it's hard to see it go away. It's nice to see come in.
So we'll cross our fingers and maybe we'll have our revenue projection, our revenues will be higher than the projections, but the projections, I think, are sound. So,
So looking at our $1,326,923 revenue shortfall. And then going over to our Fund 10 projected budget without any changes, what does that leave the bottom line to be raised by taxation?
Well, actually, as we look at the revenues, they will look at the other revenue sources down at the bottom. So the 6,400,000 and change. That will be what will be used to take off for the taxation portion. The revenues that we get for the grants do not replace pieces of Fund 10. And so those are additional revenues that come in, but those are not, they aren't something that
But
pay
they're
for
raised
what's
and
in Fund 10.
appropriated on top of Fund 10.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So it's basically
It's the other revenue
This-
sources at the bottom.
the $6,000,004. So we've got a proposed budget of $15,746,459.85. If we subtract.
Okay, hold on, Tim. I gotta ask you to stop for a second. I'm looking to get in the right spreadsheet. So Ruth Ellen,
It's the folder, the second one, under the budget documents,
budget, second one being,
SY,
This is the update that doesn't include, that we had taken the social worker out of. I had sent
so
An
this V2?
yep,
Yep.
Summary proposed in the subfolder?
yes,
this
the
is-
ones that are.
There's a
you have
subfolder,
That's
updates?
Yes.
Okay, under
So,
that.
under
it's the
that, look
second
at the
one.
summary at the bottom of the second page.
So it's V2 SY 22 summary proposed. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry to hold you up, Tim.
nope, that's fine.
Trying to get on the same page here.
So we're proposing $15,746,459.85. And what are we looking at for raised by taxation once we take that revenue that's applied to Fund 10 out?
If you subtract, let me get my,
Subtract what's the 6.4 million
yes.
out of it? 9,277,552.
I'll take that agenda for scrap paper.
You got it. Would you like lines? There you go.
I'm sorry, Brian, could you give me that number back? 9 million?
9,277,552.
Do you have a net valuation that we can calculate a tax impact on that, or? I
What
can
we
look it up?
have, based on this current tax rate, is 577,175, roughly, as you're dividing it out per thousand.
So you're saying the total valuation is 577 million?
Right.
Yeah, 577, 174, 859.
So I rounded up because it,
We'll let you.
okay,
Come on, right off the tax bill.
right. So as you look at that, it would give an overall of about $16.07. If you look at last year, we were projected at about $18 before everything shifted out.
So what is it's the state and local combined on that calculation. Where are we at now on the state and local tax? Do you know off the top of your head? I meant to look at my tax bill.
$20, 22 and change. I had it up. Hold on, let me see if I can get back to that.
So $22, and then is it $199 for the state? Or was the 22, it's 22 minus,
I need to go back and look at it. I
I
don't
think it's 22
have
minus
the breakdown.
199.
What? Administrative forms, there we go.
What were you looking for,
Final
Tim?
tax rate.
The state side? State amount?
State and local, I think it comes up combined at 22, if I remember
Well,
correctly.
yeah,
It's
state and local,
2292.
2292.
Okay, so it's 2292, and the projected on this budget is 16?
No, the school portion.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking for the school portion on the tax bill.
But-
Local education currently is $12.16,
And
Okay.
189 for the state.
$12.16.
And the state is, because
189.
So the
1405 for the combined, because that's what this formula will give us.
Sounds about right.
So it's a difference of 202-ish.
So you're saying that this budget is going to be $2 higher?
Potentially because we're looking at a fairly significant decrease in our adequacy over what we see this year.
So if
Now-
it's $2, that means between the drop in,
But keep in mind that last year,
yeah,
we were projected at 18, it came in lower
right.
because there were shifts in what we were doing.
And there was the one-time funds that came in, which dropped it even lower, that we're not getting, or it's not in this projection.
Correct,
Plus a
correct.
good fund balance that went back.
Right,
Makes a difference too. Whenever
So
you're
you
doing
had
that
those-
fund balance, you have those, the ripple effect where your
Yeah.
budget high, you end up with a lot lower.
Okay. So at the last meeting, we had gone through some of these sections and kind of set them aside. I don't know if you, and we had some that we had to revisit. I don't know, Ruth, I don't know if you kept track
And
of that,
so-
because I didn't. I'd have to go from memory
I have
and,
more or less, we had gone through and made changes to,
We got everybody in the right building.
yep, everyone's in the
Well-
right building. We went through and did the increases for,
that mostly was in Valley View, far as some of the special education services.
Actually, Henry
Henry Wilson?
was a little heavier than it should have been.
right, so
So-
we've got everybody moved where they belong.
And I believe it was behavioral services too.
So if we were going to start through this list, if we go right to the directory,
Do we want to just start at the, did you want to go through the summary, or did you want to go through the line by line of the full budget?
I think,
I can,
For-
do you want me
for
to just go through and tell you the major changes that we've made? Would that be helpful? That we were directed to make
Yeah,
last
go
week?
ahead.
Okay. So we've added the 60,000 in non-negotiated salaries. We have
that's for raises for
for non.
contractual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, non-bargaining
Employees.
unit members.
Yep.
We made the adjustment to level fund technology
Right.
with the difference of the increase in salaries
Staffing.
and staffing, yes.
And then there was a cut in legal.
There was a cut in
10,000.
legal
Did that.
that was made. Let me,
Went to 25,000.
yep. There
And then we had the
was,
assistant principal.
yep,
Plus-
added the administrative position. Those were the, and the social worker had been inadvertently left in. It was changed. That's why you have that other subfolder there. That shows the social worker pulled out of contracted
Right.
services.
And that's what we've decided that, discussed putting it forth on a warrant.
Discussed putting it forward on a warrant article,
We didn't vote on it, but we
Yeah, we-
discussed
and that
it.
hasn't been voted on.
Right.
And so the three places that appeared are the three that are changed in that subfolder. It's in the summary, it's in the full budget, and it appears in the student services budget, which is why those three are corrected there. It's not in salaries and benefits because it was under contracted service.
Okay.
Okay. Facilities, there was no change. Transportation did not have a change. SAU, the change was in legal. That was corrected.
And what about the facilities upgrade that we were talking about that Larry presented? That was like 25,000 change.
That was going
Oh,
to
it's gonna
be,
come out of it.
no, that, you authorized me to do a public hearing.
Right.
To expend that from trust fund this year.
Okay. Right.
And so that will be going in probably tomorrow. I'm setting
So
that
that's
for
not
the
in this budget?
21st. It's not in this
Okay.
budget. So I'm looking at a hearing for the 21st of December.
We also broke out the deputy treasurer. out
Right.
On the treasurer line.
Right, and that, so that was not a shift in monies, that was just creating the new
a
line
new
for
line,
that.
yeah.
And that was in the SAU office.
School board.
School board, oh, you're correct, thank you.
So Tim, do you get a chance to go through that long-handed budget and come up with any questions?
I mean, I'm okay with a budget line item by line item. My concern is both on the town side because of the loss of revenue and the school side, this is going to be a bad year. And as things stand right now, we're looking at a $2 per thousand increase. When I look at our year ending June 2020, you know, we spent $14,775,000. So we're up this year $1 million over that. Is there any way, without cutting educational programs, that we can trim? Is my question to the admin.
I would say some of your larger pieces, I mean, the curricular piece, I firmly believe needs to stay in there. We've added contingency that I think we have a good reason to have, but that is a piece that was not in there. The
Now, on that,
non-negotiated
one thing that
raises.
came up was under custodial, where we had budgeted a lot of supplies based upon this year's that we had a discussion last meeting. That
Correct.
Did we make an adjustment in that line?
We did not adjust those, and that may be someplace we can adjust.
Yeah, because that was like 20, that was substantial. I mean, that's one area that I know we talked about last meeting, and if the change hasn't been made, that's one area. I don't know.
Yeah, we brought them from 30,000 down to 10,000.
Oh, that's right, we
Okay.
did,
We did
we did
good.
trim those.
Because it
Okay.
was 8.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
yeah, so no, 10 was the right number.
Each building was at 30,000, we dropped them all to 10,000.
Okay, which is an increase over last year's expenditures.
By
Last year's
2,000.
budget was 8.
2,000 for
Yeah,
each
no,
building.
that's the way I remember, that's good.
Yep.
So that's in there. So go ahead, continue down on that, sorry.
The largest pieces are, what we have added back in with position and those other larger chunks that have not been in the past. Other than that, remember, we've got more than $200,000 right out of the gate, about $250,000 that is retirement increases before we touch anything. And so that's a fairly good-sized driver here as well.
We've actually cut our out-of-district tuition to about $250,000.
We have.
Did you come up with any areas you think, Tim, that should be really looked at?
My only other question by policy is our insurance buyback money. What, I know the teacher's contract allows for a minimum of, there's a minimum of $1,000 buyback in the teacher's contract. How much money are we paying out in buybacks total in the aggregate? Do we have a number?
We can look at that.
And that number is paid annually?
Yeah.
It's 1,500 per person.
It's 1,500 per person. By the contract, it can't go below 1,000 for the teachers. And there's.
Is that per year, per month?
That's per year.
Per year.
Yep, and that's for those that don't opt to take the
Yeah,
insurance
that's-
package. For paraprofessionals, I believe it's in that $1,000 range as well. And it has been decided by the board. Policy says that it's set each year. So certainly that could be.
I just have to look at, because that's a huge gamble. If somebody doesn't take insurance, it's costing us $1,500. If they take it, it's costing us $25,000.
Well, depending upon the.
Depending on where the
Yeah,
department-
that would be
Where they
the.
fall,
But by contract, we're required to do a minimum?
minimum of $1,000.
By the teacher's contract, it's a minimum of 1,000. There is a minimum in the Paris contract, I believe that's also 1,000.
So really, you only have the delta to work with. And if the delta's, say, 350 on average, or 250 on average, what's your total subscribers to that? It might be, would you guess, 20%?
I don't even think it's that much.
Yeah, I don't think it's that many.
I'd be surprised if it was 15.
15%?
Yeah. I mean, I think the issue too, if you bring it down to 1,000, people might like, well,
Right.
I'll just take the
I'll just take
insurance.
the insurance because I can, my husband or
Yeah.
my wife or whoever.
Yeah, I don't think there's really much to gain there.
No room there, okay.
I see where you were thinking, though. It bears looking at.
Number one, we have to set up our own policy, which we're doing in the budget process, so I guess I'd leave it alone.
I mean, you need to set the amount by policy. We have put in more or less level funded. You could decide as a board to change that. And certainly that's board prerogative.
Yeah, I wouldn't be inclined to get into that at this point. I think the potential savings is pretty minimal.
It's risky.
And
Kind of a double-edged sword. Going down that route.
any other areas? I mean, the list that you came off is, that the changes, that is consistent with what I remember. I didn't have an opportunity to go through every line, so. The one thing I wanted to bring up, unless somebody's got something else on the budget line items, I want to basically make a motion to put the SRO officer back into the budget. I'm going to state, as I have in the past, that I think it's kind of an agreement the town has made, or the district has made with the town, and I think it, to be consistent with that agreement, that it should be funded, because if it's not funded, and say if it doesn't pass on warrant article, the amount that may have to be paid back by the town and potentially us, depending on how it shakes out, could be in excess of $125,000, which is the number I got. So that's my motion to put it back in as a funded position per our previous agreement with the town.
I'll second that.
Do you have a number on that? Is it 40,000?
I don't have the number.
I do.
I think it's 40 or 42,000.
It
Ballpark.
is,
What line is it on?
You know, it's not-
all told, it's 51,443.
with the pay and benefits.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
So a motion to put that in, seconded by Joel. Discussion. Yeah, the number that was given to me, which I think came from Arthur, was up to 125,000. Because if we put it on there, and for some reason it doesn't pass, I feel it would, but if it didn't, I think it would basically be a real problem, and I think it's pretty clear, based upon the past warrant articles, that the town is certainly in favor of this position being a funded position, and I'd like to continue with the agreement that's in place. Any other discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Aye.
So, what else do we need to discuss regarding the base budget?
We took the social worker out with the understanding that it would go into a warrant article, so it may be a good time to motion for a warrant article.
So I'll make a motion to
Raise it.
create a warrant article to fund that position, to be on a warrant. I don't know how it would be worded, but
Okay,
From
so to fund it as a contracted service,
contracted, sir.
okay, not to exceed?
We have a number that we
We
use
had
budgetary?
68.5 in there.
Is that the right number to put on there?
Well,
If that's the number we put on.
we
if
felt
it's-
pretty confident that
Okay.
that was
So
a fair number to budget, so.
That'll be my number, 68.5. And if it's over that number, we're gonna have to find it in our budget, right?
Right.
See if there's unforeseen issues, time, cost, it would be on the burden of us.
And then I think,
So that's my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
Just so it's clear for the public, I think, what we're doing here is we've got a grant-funded position that ran out. We're asking the taxpayers if they want to continue that position. Next year's budget cycle, if they answer yes, they want to fund it, then that should revert back into Fund 10. Is kind of my vision of moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's been in the past, the taxpayer hasn't bear the burden of this position through a grant, and now that we're asking them to pay for it, we should ask them if they willing to pay for it, specifically through a warrant article. I think it's a reasonable request, and I believe it will pass. But that being a tight year,
Well, and if
Who
you're
knows?
looking at,
I mean, the tax impact
that
is
would be tax impact
11
of roughly
cents?
12 cents.
12 cents.
Pretty good math,
Yeah.
pretty close.
I need another half second, I would have got 12 seconds. 12 cents. You were fast on that calculator, so. So discussion on the motion. Not hearing any. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. So are we ready to move this budget forward to the Budget Committee, or we need additional discussion?
Ready to move it.
I guess,
Does that stand?
Was that Stan?
That was Stan.
Okay,
What was it?
was ready to move it forward.
Okay,
I just got a comment.
go
Is
ahead,
that-
Tim.
The $2 per thousand tax increase scares me. Typically, what happens every year is we do get additional revenue, and this revenue is kind of, what we're looking at for revenue is I think, worst-case scenario. So we may get some adjustment there. The other thing is we may get some fund balance. I looked at year-ending June of this year and year-ending June of last year. We spent about 14.5 both years, ballpark. The lower was not June, but the year before. Then we had an increase of about $300,000 in spending.
And
We're
that
in
was
a,
with positions we were unable to fill.
yep, And we're in a $16 million budget now. So I think, similar to what we did last year, I'd like to discuss a soft budget freeze at the direction of the superintendent and be real conservative in this year to offset some of that hit that's going to come next year. Just putting it out there, because I think we're going to have a hard time without that going to the budget committee, selling a $2 per thousand increase without a backup plan.
So on that discussion, if we started with the 14.5 that we've spent the last couple of years, one thing Ruth Ellen said that we have a $250,000 increase in retirement. So we bring it to 14,750.
Yeah, it's like 254 thereabouts.
Right. So 14,750. What other things are we going to be knowingly, there's going to be a wholesale increase over the last 2 years?
We're going to have an increase in
The staffing that we added.
staffing for,
And the ones we added was, how much was that?
So being added positions or added in funds?
the added positions. There were 2. Well,
The-
1.5.
What, the administrator,
And the half.
It wasn't quite
Okay.
200 though.
bookkeeper?
So the bookkeeper, so that was roughly,
Hold on, I got the spreadsheet somewhere in here.
100, it wasn't 200, but it was more than 150 probably.
yeah, it was just under 200, I believe.
So you add that in your 14,950. Then we had
We'll
some,
let him double check the spreadsheet, but I was doing round numbers.
but approximately, so even, I'm just kind of trying to balance out the 2 historical years before this year.
We're at 185 for the next year of the teacher's contract on raises.
So you had another 185, you're at 15,150, say.
We've got a small janitor's contract that's going to be an increase. I think that's 30,000.
I want to say it was more like 25.
And then we added some curriculum
27-ish, yes.
of like
We added
35 or
curriculum,
45?
45.
45. So, I mean, I think even with tightening our belt, we're going to be looking at, if you carry those past 2 years with what we know we're going to have for increases this year, you're going to be 15,250. So you could be up 750,000 based upon the retirement, additional positions, teacher's contract, janitor's contract. So that, just for discussion, I don't see what's being at 1450. Because that's, we know some of the increases we're going to hit.
Yep.
So, but I'm not opposed to certainly discussing. I don't think we need to make a decision tonight. I think we could certainly present it, that it's under consideration to the Budget Committee. Because, there's a lot of the year left to go. And
There is a lot of, and there's a lot of unknowns left in the year that
Right.
has been weirder than any year we've
So
seen.
certainly as far as tightening our belt sooner than later, I'm for. And we might need to have some additional discussion of where that focus needs to be, Before, we had a shorter time frame, and we said, just some rough guidelines, but with this much time to go, I think there might warrant some more discussion of areas of concentration for staff.
I'm just having a hard time. I'm pretty conservative budgetary-wise. I'm looking at the budget as it's presented now, and I don't think we can cut anything without impacting education, and that's not what I want to do. I think we're stuck with the revenue shortage. I think it stinks for the taxpayer. On top of what the town's predicting, it's going to be a bad year, and I think if we tighten our belt, we may be able to loosen some of that bad year.
Yep. But that impact, it was too early to tell what that impact could be.
Yeah.
It may only be,
Could be $1, it could be 50 cents. It depends on, there's just too many
could be
unknowns that
could be
are there.
25.
Yeah.
Last year, tax rating, we predicted an 85 cent per thousand increase. We came in at 25. This year, if we projecting a $2 per thousand increase, and we have a decent fund balance, if we average the fund balance, that $2 is going to at least come down to $1 if we go on average of what we've been returning every year.
Yeah, will we be able to do that much? We'll have to see.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
other thing that we can look at too is what you're taking for unexpended fund balance at the end of the year for warrant articles.
Right, and I think there's only been one so far.
So far, it's just the 13,000 for the robotics. One of the things that we probably need to look at as well is in our general CIP, the next section of roof for Henry Wilson was slated for next year. May be able to do that out of capital reserve. Could potentially wait a year if we need to do that as well. And what I have for a cost on that was the higher cost of the former system that we were using.
Right.
So likely it will be less.
Yeah.
Right now, it's slated at about $100,000.
And that is something that I think that once we get through the budgetary cycle, we should potentially put it out for bid sooner than later.
Absolutely. So that
Especially
we have
where
some
we're
idea.
hot off this project. We potentially could get it in the slate for next summer, and
But we need to have some idea what the funding stream is going to be, whether that needs to be a warrant or.
what's the balance in that capital reserve account?
Trust funds, let's see here. I grabbed it, but I put it somewhere else.
Was it 2 weeks ago that we had
It
some?
was last week, I believe. Might have been 2 weeks ago, 16th, perhaps.
Which,
The trust funds, yep, there it is. I got
got
it.
it here.
Which one was it?
It was in the
16th?
16th, yes.
Budget, revised staffing? No?
Nope, it says trust fund workbook.
Okay.
Construction and renovation?
Yep.
So, under,
Construction and renovation had 120,000 in it, we still gotta take this roof out of it, and then.
correct, and we were
capital
looking at
improvements
doing capital
95, but
improvements.
We weren't gonna touch that one.
We are for the system for the boilers,
Which
and
is
that was
26.
26-ish. So that would still leave roughly 74. Nope, 69.
And the
Sorry.
previous budget for the roof was 100?
Yes, so it may be roughly enough that would definitely between the two trust funds, if not the one, to be able to take that there. Whether you want to do that from a roof or for a warrant article, or you are agents to expend both of those.
Yes, that's a reasonable stretch with what we got for funds.
But,
And I certainly wouldn't want to go to the taxpayer this year and ask for it
no.
if we feel we don't need to because we have the funds.
But with that, looking at, you had also talked about wanting to start to replenish those funds
Right.
because we're drawing fairly heavily on them.
Yep.
So that was more where I was going.
Yeah,
If you're going to do that, is that something you're wanting
Yeah,
to look at?
I wouldn't, but this is
unexpended
the
fund
year to
balance?
ask to start replenishing those. I think, we'd have to, the following year would be better,
Okay,
because I think some of our state funding hopefully will be back.
see what the biennial budget looks like, yep.
And
I'll take
hopefully the
it.
town side will be better, and we can should be able to make do with what we have. So I'll make a motion to move the revised budget to the Budget Committee, as amended.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Next thing is to get to the warrants. We had talked about, we had a few that we motioned and a few that we discussed, and kind of if we can go down through the list, Bruce Allen, start with what we motioned and add what we discussed.
Okay, so you have motioned for the social worker as a contracted service at 68.5, or not to exceed 68.5. And I will check with DRA and see if they will allow us the not to exceed, or if it has to be for the full amount. I'm not sure which.
I think it's been a not to exceed, similar to what we did on our roof. I believe the language was not to exceed.
I don't know if they'll let us do that on a position or not. I'll ask. Where it's a contracted service, they may.
Yeah.
They may. The robotics for 13,316. Right now, those are the two that are solid. There's been discussion about roof, which it looks like that's now going to trust fund or
Yeah.
expendable capital reserve. There had been discussion
Generator.
about the generator, and that's the other big one. And whether you were going to put that on a warrant article or take that from
So,
capital reserve, because if you were going to take that, it would likely come from the FHS construction and renovation. That is the one that you are not agents to expend. So that would have to go to an article.
50,000 in the safety and emergency fund.
Yep.
That
So
would-
it could go there as well.
well, we have 95,000 in the capital improvements and renovations.
Right, less the 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, say the expense for the generator is 12,000 and installs 20. I don't think it will be, but that's 35,000.
It's looking like it's going to be more than that. You may have to go out to some bids.
And what did you get so far?
Just Yates.
What's that?
Yates is the only one so
But
far.
was it by the pole or a different location?
They said it wouldn't work closer. It was where the thing is now. We have the fence up there now. That's still the best place to do it. They run the conduits along the same.
Yeah, and why
Same.
was a place in a lower area acceptable?
More excavation. You have to redo all the lines down there. That's the reason he gave me. I'm not an electrician. I know
Yeah, I
that's
don't
more-
think they
it's
can
more
just
your-
go overhead right through into the building?
He said it still wouldn't be it still would be not as cost effective as you thought it would, think it would
Okay.
be. So, that's why I'd like to have someone else.
Did
at
you
least
give
come
a
in and look at it.
guesstimate?
Yeah, it's minus some of the stuff that you were talking about, we're still up about 70 to 75, which I think is a lot higher than I thought we.
Yeah, I mean, the original install there was 117 unit and installation.
I don't think it included all the installation. I think the unit itself was like 117.
Oh, I thought it did. Oh.
But that's why I'd like to at least speak to some other people.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely have to go out for a solid bid to see what other people feel that's the best way to go. I mean, that might be the answer, it's to go there.
I just think the rates are probably a lot higher too.
Where the pole is now and the wire that they have to run, can that be run through the existing conduit or?
So it's against code to do that.
Okay, so it's got to be a separate conduit.
Yeah.
As far as the power in or the signal wires?
Not the power going in, the signal wires going out. Can't
Okay.
be the same conduit.
It'll have to be an additional from what there's already now.
Right. They'll put it right next to it, but it has to be in a separate.
Yeah, yeah, I would expect that because of the current, the voltage. Yeah, so say if it's 60, then that's a significant amount that if you have the 15 that Tim talked about, and say you got 60 in the capital reserve, that's 75. I mean, that's, the tough thing is without a solid number going forth to the taxpayer and asking for it, it's it's a tough sell. Different if we,
I can start making calls tomorrow. I'll get somebody, I mean, I don't know if you know anybody.
I mean, warrants need to be in by beginning of January. So we do
Yeah,
have a
we've got a
little
month.
bit of time to get it solidified. And it could be put on the list of, we're exploring this to see if this is
right.
a
Yeah,
warrant.
yeah, I think we should continue with it and then try to get some solid quotes in. We can always pull it back. If we feel we have the revenues available through capital reserve, if we get a better estimate. And if not, we could go forward for the entire amount or for a portion. I mean, one thing is to go forward with a portion. And then if we're plus or minus,
The rest comes from capital reserve.
yeah,
then.
like say if we were to go forth with, say, a $50,000 number. So say 12 and then a 35 or 37 for the install, and if it's over, we'd have to take it out of capital reserve. I mean, if we have a solid number by then, we could use that solid number, but,
Charlie, does it make sense to, we're agents to expend on the safety and security account, which is 50,000. Does it make sense to do a warrant article to add 25,000 to that account out of fund balance? Then we're at 75,000. So even if we draw the generator off, no matter what price we come in, we're still gonna have a balance in that account versus taking it out of a capital reserve account that can be used for multiple things. Like the safety and security account can just be used on safety and security, but the other capital improvement accounts can be used if we have to add new windows or a variety. We have more flexibility with those accounts.
another thought, expanding on that is, what if we would have just, instead of going forward with the warrant article for the generator, let's go forward with a larger number of safety and security, intending to fund this.
So do more than the 25, put
Yeah.
50 in there, so that gives you 100, and then when
Right,
you
I
draw
mean,
down, there's
we
still
can tell
something
you,
left.
give the intent, this is our plan, to basically put in a backup generator and with the install, and, we may be able to solidify what the exact cost is, but based upon adding, say if you added
if you
35
add-
to 50 in this
Okay.
number?
So I'll make a motion that we raise and appropriate $50,000 out of fund balance to be deposited in the safety and security account for the purposes of the generator.
So how much was it?
50,000?
50? Okay.
I'll second. Any discussion?
What was the last part, for the purpose of what?
The emergency generator.
Thank you.
Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yep.
If we say then that we are,
We may want to leave that last part out.
okay, that's what
strike
I was
that.
asking, because if we raise that much and it's put there, but it's for that purpose, if the generator actually ends up costing less, you can't expend those funds on anything but the generator.
Good.
I mean, it'll give you upkeep
Yeah.
for a while, but,
And we can put it in a discussion, just not in the warrant.
Right.
correct,
Okay.
correct, okay.
The last one I had that I spoke about a couple times this year was Little Red Schoolhouse. I think that we should get a cost estimate of what that's going to take to rehab that building, bring it up to code and usable, and put that on a warrant article, and asking the taxpayer is if they basically want to fund this restoration of the historical building. Because I don't think it's $80,000. I think it's north of 200. And I think we could ask Jeff Greenhall to look at the building and give us an estimate of what it'd take for his time to get estimates from general contractors to say, put in a quote to say, this is how much time and service is to get estimates to bring the building up to code, whether it's foundation, structural, electrical, plumbing.
So you want Jeff to do that, or did you want us to put out a general RFP?
I'd like this, we've used him on the building, I'd like to have him give us an estimate, good, because really what I want to get it is a rough order of magnitude. I don't want to get firm fixed quotes. I want to basically get, what does this number look like? If we get reasonable estimates, I'm confident that by qualified people, that if and when the taxpayers approve it, that we'll be able to fund it for that amount. And if not, we'll deal with it then. I mean, if we're off $20,000, $30,000 or something on this project, because if they give us an estimate, we should apply a certain amount of contingency. And my number is at least 20%. So if we get qualified bidders and they say, this is the work, and we say, okay, we're going to put in a contingency based upon this quote of 20%, put that forth on a warrant article, whatever those numbers are, by qualified people, not from me or Tim or Larry saying, well, this is what we think it's going to take. What is it going to take? And put it forth to them. I think he could do it maybe,
I was going to say,
I think it'd be relatively straightforward, and it would give us a number.
do you have, because I don't have that budgeted, do you have an amount that you're thinking that would be going toward that?
To make that estimate?
Yes.
I think it's going to be less than $1,000, to be honest.
Okay.
For him to meet with the general contractors, I mean, he might meet with 4 or 5 contractors. If it takes an hour a contractor and he writes a report, he might have, I don't know, 8 to 12 hours. So I don't know what he was quoting for a rate, but say if you're using a $75 an hour rate, he gets you under $1,000. I mean, we'd know if we ask him for an estimate. If he gives an estimate, if the board doesn't feel it's appropriate, then we can go out for a bid for those services, and depending on how much it is, it's, we can either take it out of some,
I'll find a line.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah.
But
So that would be something I'd like to at least pursue. Not saying that, we may get to a point where the board says, no, we don't want to have it on the warrant. I mean, I'll make a motion to do that. So maybe I'll just make a motion to get estimated cost to rehab for the Red Schoolhouse to be put forth on a warrant to see if the taxpayers want to fund the rehab of that historical building.
so the motion
Seconded
is to
by-
get the cost for the rehab.
Right.
Okay.
And that was seconded by Josh? Or was
So
it
Josh
Stan?
or Stan?
That was Dan.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Stan. Discussion?
I think it's reasonable, but I think once we have that cost, there's grant funding out there that'll pay for it as well. One of them is the license plate fees that I think will fund up to 50% of the project. So we've got more potential homework to doing than just saying, do we want to raise and appropriate this number? So a $300,000 number might come down to 150. But
Well, maybe the warrant article needs to be, not to raise and appropriate, but for their consent to pursue it. I don't know. I mean, because if they say they don't want to put forth the money this year or in future years, because say if we were going to do that, and so now we're going to we're going to rehab it. The taxpayer says they want it rehabbed. Estimated cost is $300.
So do we have a vote on the motion to get the cost to rehab it?
Okay.
And then
Well,
we'll
let's-
talk
yeah.
about the next warrant.
Any other discussion on the motion, which is to get the cost? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
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 So,
No. Aye.
no on Josh or Stan?
I believe that was Josh.
Okay.
Josh, were you the dissenting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe the question this year is to say, do they want us to pursue it? And then over the next year, we could have solid bids, seek additional funding
Grant
sources
funding,
for
and
that
then
money.
go back and say, here's what we've been able to secure.
Right.
Here's what it will take. Are you still in favor of that?
Right. I mean, and if they do say they want to rehab a historical structure, we may have to do some things next year, make sure the roof is solid so we don't have continued deterioration. It may not be that much, but it may be some. That, like, we didn't do anything this year.
Good tarps anyway.
Right?
Right.
Did we do anything last year?
We've not done anything with that building since my tenure began.
Okay, so, yeah, so if we at least get an estimate, put forth a question, and then, depending on the answer by the taxpayers, we can proceed one direction or
So,
another.
Are you looking at proposing a warrant article as far as asking their,
I would say at this point, talking it through, I would say permission to pursue the rehab, because Tim brings up a good point. If we were to just say, hey, give us $300,000, and they say yes, and we don't spend the time looking for additional funding, we could be spending more taxpayers' money than we absolutely need to, because we may be able to seek some of the other funding. And
Okay.
that would be
so we have
what our
a,
taxpayers would like us to do, I'm sure.
so we have a motion to create a warrant asking the taxpayers for permission to pursue the rehab of the Little Red Schoolhouse.
With a cost estimate that we
Okay.
provide. Yep, that's my motion.
Second that.
Discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone else with any proposed warrants? School buses we're okay with, based on what we got for funds?
I think, based on what we have for funds, were we to need to do that, we could do that with a public hearing and a purchase. That was the point of
Right.
adding funding to those.
So, one point I had on the bus, you were looking for a school bus, full-size, and then a 15-passenger?
Correct.
I know, and maybe this is a foolish question, but Farmington Rec had purchased a 14-passenger used a few years ago, and they may not be utilizing that now. Maybe they are, I don't know. Does it make sense to ask the question, is this something they feel that they're going to use? And would it make sense for us, say if they don't have a use for the next 3 years, and it's just sitting around, it's not doing it any good.
No.
Does it make sense to say, you would consider selling it to us if it's something we would consider buying for what we have for needs, and use it as a stopgap? I mean, because it is a used piece. It's not going to
Right.
get us 12 years,
Right, it might get us 5 or 6.
5 or 6. And if
Yeah.
it's currently, the town doesn't have it, maybe they do have a future need for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I suspect we will probably use it more heavily than the town did, so
Right, but they, I don't know if it's been utilized this year at all.
I suspect it's probably sat since March.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I would like, for me, I'd like to have Ruth Allen at least reach out to Arthur and ask the question. Because it might be some opportunity there for us to get some life out of it while it's sitting, and at least take that off of our short list next, because that was going to be a purchase this coming year.
That was what we're looking at from that trust fund,
Tim?
or capital reserve.
If we don't do any warrant articles towards our buses, how does that throw off our purchase schedule? So we've been taking X amount of dollars and put it aside per year,
Right.
so that when we have to buy, the money's there.
We've been taking it from unexpended fund balance.
Yep.
We've been putting roughly 50 in a year. Part of it is because we didn't do as much mileage on the buses at the last quarter of last year as well. We can probably eke out a little bit more time on where we are rather than doing
Okay,
too full.
I just don't want to see 100,000 next year if we could have put 50,000 this year and 50,000 next.
Right.
I think we should do something.
I think that makes sense.
Okay,
because-
Yeah.
Because a bus is going to run about 80,000.
Yep.
So if we put aside at least a chunk of each year, it's easier on the rotation than to try to raise and appropriate it all at once, and we save the
Right.
leasing
And
on
it's,
it.
it's less inexpensive than the leasing, so do we
Yes.
make a motion for 50?
I think we got to do at least 30, so I think it's 30, between 30 and 50,
Split the difference and call it 40?
I mean, we've been going 50,000, if my memory serves me correct, and that schedule has been doing us well, I'd say don't break something that's not broken.
Well, yes, but I also remind you that you've said you want to make sure that we have as much that we
Right.
can return to the town this year as possible. So maybe this is the year to look at 30 rather than 50 because. But that's up to you.
So with shutting down in March, do you think that put us a year ahead of our purchase scheduling?
I don't know that it put us a full year. Part of the issue that we've had too is that the buses have not reacted
Right.
well to sitting. And so while they don't have the mileage on them, we've had some other issues crop up because they don't sit well.
Yeah, I think them not running, there's a fixed life, and I think the mileage is not our main concern. Even though they've sat for a year, I would not expect myself any extended life out of these buses. Because some of the issues that we creep up are just because of the age.
And I will let you know, we do have right now one of our vans
Yeah.
that's having some major repairs done.
Yeah, I would, if they sat for 2 years, they're not going to get 2 more years out of them, so.
Yeah.
I mean, our buses are a primary asset, and it just makes me nervous. That's not an area that we should be cutting. And I'll make the motion that we raise and appropriate $50,000 out of fund balance for the purposes of the bus capital reserve fund.
The motion is a second. I'll second for discussion. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes. What other warrant articles have historically been on there that we haven't talked about, besides the busing?
The other warrant article that you will likely have, if we can get a date, will be the para contract, which we obviously don't
Right.
have that piece, but that will be another consideration that will be.
What,
before
any
the-
other facilities? I know that we've got some, we still have some capital reserve accounts in construction and repair. We've got some heating and system CRS, which we've got, 100,000 in. I mean, I think next year we need to go out with, the air purifiers that
Right.
Brian had brought up, which was an estimate of $24,000. Where will we add it?
Larry actually was talking with Siemens about it. I don't know where he ended up with it. Like,
So we're
basically-
feeling that if we're going to do that upgrade, we're going to have the funds in capital reserve?
Was that
We
the
should.
federal money we were looking at, or was it capital reserve?
Well, we were all actually looking at, originally we were looking at the latest one we had
Right.
from December 30th, but
At this
I
point, to
don't know,
try to
we
get
only got
that
4
in
weeks,
and.
4 weeks left. I'll have to track down Larry tomorrow and find out where.
But the other one expires next year. Is that something that we could get something out of the other one in here and carry it over to the original?
Iffy. We can look at it and see if we could. We're pulling it out just about everything we can.
So, Mayor?
Go ahead.
Going back to Fund 10, at one time, we had a dollar line item for matching grants. And I think they went out this last budget or whatever. Does it make sense under the school board line to do a $1 line item for matching grants so that if grant opportunities come along, and we haven't appropriated money in the budget cycle, if it's something outside of our norm, that we can apply for that as long as we can find the money within the budget?
Would that go under school board or under the SAU?
It could go, I said school board, it can go anywhere that we can spend it. I just think I think for $1, I think to lose a grant opportunity because we didn't appropriate any money
Okay.
is foolish.
We could certainly add a line to the SAU budget. That would be an amendment to the budget that you've already moved forward, so it'll up it by $1.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
So looking at our capital reserve funds, if we were going to add some money for some potential HVAC upgrades in all three schools for air purification, would that go under construction and renovation? Buildings and grounds, CRF? I mean, which one would we put it under?
I would say probably construction and renovation. It could go buildings and grounds. Well, you've got, let's see, you have capital improvements and renovations, and you have,
For construction and renovation,
Yeah,
we'll be taking,
construction and
we're
renovation
taking
will
the
have
Henry
a,
Wilson roof money out of that.
right.
So it's what, 65 grand?
So are you looking to,
Well, if we were to
Add to
add some
one.
money to potentially take care of the air purifiers, either we have it now that we're comfortable we have it, or we're gonna need to add it.
I would say if you were going to do that, buildings and grounds makes sense, it's about the same amount. But what it will do is take that down to a couple $1,000s.
Yeah, that's,
It would be a placeholder,
Dangerous.
it wouldn't close it, but
Yeah,
I'd rather raise and appropriate the money out of, again, we've got 50,000, maybe another 30,000, what was the estimate? Was that the 20?
it's 24.
it's 24.
24.
That was an
So
estimate.
raise and appropriate the 24,000 out of fund balance.
I would say 30. I'll make a motion to raise and appropriate 30,000 out of fund balance as a warrant article for potential air quality upgrades.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that is going to
No.
buildings and grounds?
Josh is a no. That is for, 1993. Oh, that's the date it's established, sorry.
That's okay.
FSD Building and Grounds Capital Fund. My last
Okay.
one,
And are we saying for the purpose or just adding it to?
just adding to.
Okay.
We can use that in the discussion, but not would be tied to it. Last one we had talked about, which is surprised I didn't remember earlier, was lighting. I think we should put forth a warrant article to ask permission of voters to seek lighting upgrades in all schools, and that with no tax impact and to be funded through cost savings. And I think we have to put a number on that? Or do
Well,
we?
if you're saying it no tax impact through cost savings.
Right.
Then what it does is you cannot do it if there's any impact at all.
Right. So typically, if we did it
So
and say.
technically, if it costs you $1, you
Right.
can't do it,
Yep.
if you put it that way.
So we would have to be funded through cost savings, and if it was a 7 or 8 year note, that's what it would have to be. I mean, I don't know how else typically they're structured. Brian, I don't know if you have any, if I was to get a little bit of wiggle room in that,
I mean,
can't be a dollar over?
You can stretch it out. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done that before, the first railroad, so. But you have to, as long as you can guarantee you'll get that savings down the road too, because there is some bit of deterioration down the road of
Right.
savings. You want to make sure you don't hit the crossroads where.
Yeah, at year 6, it costs you $15, therefore,
Well, you could do it on a lease with a buyout too. Some people do that.
yeah,
And that's
but-
usually about 5 to 6 years before you have that option to buy
Yeah.
it, depending on how much you're spending. Might be 4 years.
Yeah, that may not work is on a 5-year note, based upon some of the estimates we saw. I think it's going to be a
yes, it was
8-year
going to take at
schedule.
least 7, I think, to break
Yeah,
even. is what we
7, 8.
saw.
I think it's something we should do. I don't want to see it as a tax impact to the taxpayer, but based upon the way it needs to be proposed, I think we need to get permission of the taxpayer to do it.
And so right now, is there a second?
A second for discussion.
Okay. So I have to seek lighting upgrades in all schools at no tax impact, paid through cost savings.
Energy savings.
Energy savings.
And then what we could do is if it passes, we go out to competitive bid for those upgrades. And then pick the best proposal for the town, whoever that is. It's going to be, we all know it's going to be north of probably $500,000. We saw it extends from, and depending on what there is for PSNH energy rebates. This year, there were some additional incentives that may or may not be there next year. So, it's going to be a competitive market, so I think that's something we can pursue. Any other discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have anything else? We've got buses, lighting, air and quality improvements, generator, Little Red Schoolhouse, robotics, social worker.
I think you should leave a placeholder for Paris contract, potentially.
Well, that goes without saying, yeah.
Are we done? We missing anything?
I think you've hit most of the bases there, and certainly I can,
The kitchen equipment that you spoke about, the upgrades we did with the warmers, that was a total like $4,500, I think Larry said,
right.
and that's
Right,
come out of
so
that capital reserve.
We can do that as part of the, we're going to be doing a public hearing for the 21st. We could do the public hearing for that at the same time, to take that from capital reserve, if you wish. Do you want to combine those two?
With,
We're doing a public hearing for the Siemens piece for the boiler system. So if I'm going to do a posting, it's cheaper if I can post them together.
as far as the upgrades to take it out of capital reserve?
We're doing the public hearing posting for that. Do you want me to add a public hearing to take the 4,500 out of the kitchen equipment at the same time?
Okay, where else were we going to take it from?
Well, right now, it's been eaten out of general fund, because we had to go ahead and do it. But if we want to reimburse from capital reserve, we will need to do the public hearing. So I guess what I'm asking you is if you want to kill two birds with one stone or do it.
Yeah, I guess it would make sense, but that fund is only at $7,600? Is that the one I'm looking at?
We're adding 35,000 to it.
Oh, plus the new
Right.
35?
Yes.
Okay, so we've
So there's
actually
a
got
little
plenty
more
of
than
funds
that in
there.
it,
Okay.
yes. It won't wipe it out.
Yeah, no, I would think that'd be a good idea.
Okay.
Anyone else? Discussion on that? So that current fund is at 42,000?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone, anything else regarding budget? Tim?
I guess I'll ask a question, which will generate another question or statement. Today's the 30th. Are we meeting on the 7th before the public hearing?
That would be our regularly scheduled December meeting.
So that's a yes.
Well,
Definitely.
it's up to the board chair, but that's the
Well,
regularly
what-
scheduled
what-
meeting.
Well, I know we've been on a feverish pace of every week.
Well,
What
are
do
gonna
we have?
We're going to have a manifest next week. We need a manifest signed. So if you don't do it by meeting, you'd have to come in and
Right, but what do we have for things that we have to do?
financials.
Financials, preview of budget pieces, the presentation, which I can put in your folder anyway.
I think,
That doesn't require a vote, that's just a
Right.
yeah,
heads up.
I think for the budget presentation and where I was going on it, and I like the analysis of what Charlie talked out loudly. Let's look at year ending June 30th of our last fiscal year, what we raised and appropriated, we're in the 15 millions. We spent in the 14 millions, so we sent $900,000 back to the taxpayers in that budget. Adding on to what we spent is the money for the increase in retirement, the increase in insurance, to get us to where we are in that $15 million number that we approved tonight. So a big chunk of what we spent ending June 30th to where we are now is
It's
bills
contractual
out of our
obligation.
controls. It's the union contract, it's the insurance increases, and it's the retirement increases.
Right.
And I think that needs to be crystal clear that that's where our money is. And then, I'd kind of like for the 9th consensus from the board to say, we realize this is a big hit, and we're hoping to decrease that, and here's our average history of what we've sent back, by doing a soft budget freeze.
But the 9th is the budget hearing.
The 9th is a budget
So he
hearing.
wants to be able to announce at the budget hearing that there is a soft freeze in place. Am I reading that correctly?
To offset that projected $2 tax.
I don't have any problem stating that we're considering putting a soft pay increase to reduce that as low as reasonable, but we don't know.
We don't know what it's
We
going
don't
to
know
be,
what the number's gonna be.
but I think more what I'm looking for is to make an honest representation to the budget committee saying, hey, we don't like this number, but it's out of our control. But between now and the end of the fiscal year, we're going to do whatever we can to try to offset that number. And that's all I'm kind of looking for. Because if we return the same numbers that we returned last year, that's a big decrease in that number.
Yeah, even if we.
I don't know
even
that I'll
if
have
you
the
don't
same
get all
conditions
that.
as last year.
Right,
but-
even if you don't get to that point, it's still a honest effort of just controlling costs.
Right. I think we need to make that representation that we don't like this increase. I'm conservative, and I don't see cuts to make that aren't going to impact education. And I think education needs to be our number one goal. But I also think going forward, knowing this is going to be a bad year, we got to do everything we can to save a penny to offset those increases.
Yeah. I mean, I plan to be at the meeting on the 9th during the presentation. I know Brian's going to be there, Ruth Ellen's going to be there, Tim's going to be there. Any other board members who want to be there, feel free. I just want to make
If
sure.
we'll have a quorum, I want to make sure I post it.
We should post it anyway, just to be precautionary.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to satisfy any questions they have, and hopefully they feel comfortable, or at least understanding of our position, and, recognize that, we're trying to be, cost conscious,
So I guess.
without sacrificing education.
So I guess back to that, then, are you seeing the need for a meeting on the 7th, or are you looking to just commit to coming in and signing a manifest for us, because we really need that done?
Personally, I'd like to give the board members and staff the night off.
Hear, hear.
If they're going to prepare for the budget meeting, which will be, usually, adventurous and exciting.
They are always very respectful during
And,
those
if we don't have to meet,
presentations, so.
I don't have any problem coming in and signing manifests. But like I said, we've been pushing hard. If we get this apparently we've got this tackled tonight, and I don't see a meeting necessarily, unless Ruth Ellen's something we got to take care of.
Not that I see as a huge need at this point.
So I would not have a meeting at this point. And then if we didn't have a meeting on the 7th, when would I?
Your next regularly scheduled meeting would be the 21st.
Right.
If you chose to have the interim meeting, it would be the 14th.
Yeah, I would tentatively say we'd probably have a meeting the 14th.
And then if you're not meeting the 21st, I need to see if I can get that public hearing either moved to the 14th,
No,
which is going to be
we may
squeaking
have to
it,
meet there. I mean,
or we do it after,
right. I mean,
after the holiday
Our scheduled
break,
meeting
which is
is the
possible.
21st. If we have to hold a meeting on the 14th for either negotiation purposes, because there's some negotiation going on, or if something that comes out of the budget committee that we need to meet on, we could always add that meeting.
But the next
14th.
regularly scheduled to be the 21st.
Leave that
Meet the 14th if
if
we need to.
necessary.
Okay.
So take next Monday off. Meet the 14th if necessary, under negotiations, budget, or something else significant.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the way I'll proceed unless any of the board members have any concerns with that.
Would at least two of you be available for the
Yep.
manifest next week?
Yeah, I can come
Just
in. I'm
let me
here.
know.
I'm here every day anyway, so.
You need a broom, you can do some sweeping in the parking lot in the morning? I'll buy you a new one.
He knows how to direct traffic and go Valley View.
No.
You need a pair of white
Just
gloves?
Nope.
I got one Michael gave me.
Michael?
Don't go there.
He's too old. Anything else that we need to tackle in this meeting? So at this point, I'd like to make a motion to...
I do need to do nominations and resignations
Okay.
as well.
So I'll make a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A32, nominations and resignations,
Second.
which is, what are those letters?
A, B, and C.
They are?
Yeah.
A, B, and C.
Yep.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Yay.
So I'd like to wish everyone a good night, and we'll see you at the budget meeting on the 9th.
All of us, whether or not we served in uniform, are veterans of a war in which freedom and free government are at stake. Our victory, won at staggering cost, will not be consolidated until we and our children and grandchildren know the manifold ways in which freedom is still under attack, and we are